Most people have heard the definition of insanity, where if you do the same thing over and over and expect different results, you are considered to be insane. Though most people who are doing the same thing over and over never actually think they're the ones doing the same thing over and over until someone points it out to them in just the right way, where they can actually get, oh my gosh, I'm actually doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I bring that up because I want to talk to you about how you actually manage your purchasing power, how you manage your portfolio, your investments, your money in really a situation, a time in our lives, a time in the life of this country, the life of this planet, where though inflation isn't happening in the conventional sense, which typically people think of inflation as the CPI number going up, though most people know that inflation is not just some government managed number, it's what it actually costs you to live based on where you live. So if you live in Manhattan or you live in Silicon Valley, two expensive places to live, where inflation is easily 5% a year, you know that the government numbers really don't necessarily help you or give you any insight. So I want to talk about this thing about inflation and purchasing power and decisions people are making. And specifically, just, a lot of people are talking about you got to own gold to manage inflation, or you got to own this to manage inflation. And it's not really, an investment that's going to help you manage inflation. And I want to talk with you about that. Now, my thought of the week is really about Janet Yellen and what a horrible job she is taking on. Why anyone, it would have to be an academic who would think that they could actually help with what they're doing. And, one thing that's always bothered me is when academics, people who don't live in the real world, they live in universities and behind university, walls, and they don't really have to meet a payroll or deal with the normal things normal people have to deal with because, well, they're not going to lose their job. They have tenure, and they're allowed to just kind of think up ideas. So we have these academic economists that are kind of pushing the buttons for us. And so my thought is that Janet Yellen absolutely is the scapegoat for what Greenspan has done and Bernanke has done and other central bankers around the world have done. And she will not be able to escape it because we will have enough unstableness, enough fragility in this decade. I mean, we're only 3 years into this decade where things are going to really come apart. And for some people that for some people that may mean deflation first, then inflation, or inflation right away. So whether we have a deflationary glut or we go right into inflation, it doesn't necessarily matter specifically because what we're talking about is instability. And so the question is, instability breeds eventually inflation, whether we have hyperinflation or not. I don't know. And in fact, I don't even think we need to have hyperinflation. But what do you do? What do you do to protect your purchasing power? What do you do? I thought RC told me you should buy gold, or you should buy stocks, or you should buy IBM, or you should buy Apple, or you should buy Facebook, or you should buy a bond. And if you've been with me in my world, drinking my Kool-Aid for any amount of time, you know that to manage something, to grow something, to protect something is never an investment. It's never a ticker symbol. And this is what where I want to come back to that I started with at the beginning of this podcast is people are doing the same thing expecting a different experience. People are continuing to buy ticker symbols expecting that their future will be different. It's not about the ticker symbol. It's not about the stock pick. It's about the strategy. And when you look at this price chart here, when you look at the 10-year bond yield, the yield on the 10-year bond, and I put in this little diagonal trend line, back in September when the 10-year almost broke above 3%, Bernanke came out and said, no, I'm not going to taper. Please, I'm not going to taper a 10-year bond yield. Please get below 10%. But look at on the screen here how it fell a little bit here. It fell down to here, call it maybe 2.5, and then it moved right back up to 2.7%. And this is with Janet Yellen coming out and saying, hey, I'm going to do more easing, more printing. She didn't use those specific words necessarily. But even in the face of that, the yield on the 10-year is moving higher. And I think the higher that moves, the more instability that is coming our way, even if we don't see it immediately. And then you look at the 30-year bond, which is even closer to the yield it was at before Bernanke came out and said, okay, uncle, I won't pull back on the printing press at all, because in fact Summers is not coming into the next job. Yellen's coming in and she wants to print more money, so I'm going to just go ahead and just, we're just going to continue printing as much as we possibly can, as much as the bond market will let us. And it feels like the bond market sooner rather than later is going to come out and say, we're not okay with you printing $1 trillion+ a year. And so you have these two markets, 10-year and a 30-year, are different markets, but they're both yields, they're both bonds, they're both on the US dollar, really is what it is. They're moving higher, and that is going to breed more instability and more fragility into the market. But it's not showing up yet in the stock market. If you look at the screen here, the red squiggly line going higher is the stock market. And the stock market is where inflation is showing up right now. Inflation does not show up in this world, on our planet, in a linear fashion, meaning it doesn't show up equally across the globe in everything from sugar cubes to the stock market to Ford F-150s. It shows up in pockets here and there, then it moves to other pockets. Literally, it's creating little micro bubbles or big bubbles. And so as the red line goes higher, which is the S&P 500, the black line on the screen here is the percentage of stocks above their 200-day moving average. So in a healthy market, what you'd see is the stock market going up and more stocks going up, moving up past above their 200-day moving average. But in fact, that's not what we're seeing here. Fewer and fewer stocks, and this price chart you're looking at right now goes back to the beginning of this year. Fewer and fewer stocks are moving above their 200-day moving average while the stock market continues to move higher. Inflation is moving the stock market higher. That's totally fine. Have a strategy. Have a strategy that can adapt to what the stock market is doing. Have a strategy that can manage how to cover your purchasing power, how to protect your account balances, how to protect your net worth. It's about the strategy. That's what you want. You want to protect yourself against the incoming inflation and instability and unstableness that's absolutely moving this way. History is 100% clear on when major countries of the world print massive amount of money, then instability follows, and that's every time. The only other time it's ever not happened is when teeny tiny companies that are like 3 million or 4 million or 5 million people in size can print, but no one really cares if Sweden prints a lot of, what are they, kroners? Because it's a teeny tiny country. But when major economies of the world, G7 economies of the world, print large quantities of money, you have instability, and it's followed every single time. So we do know in this decade we're going to get instability. But you can't expect the normal ways, and certainly the normal ways of protecting your purchasing power by ticker symbols. That's not going to help. It's about the strategy you choose that can adapt to the market, that almost doesn't care whether the market goes up or the market goes down, and that just has you on the right side of the market. And so my final thought is, if you want to manage inflation on 95% of your expenses, right? However much you make, 95% of between your taxes and what you spend, 95% of your expenses. If you think you're going to manage the cost increase on that with only a 5% savings, meaning I'm only going to save 5% of my money and I'll take that 5%, and it's going to work so hard and so amazingly well that it will protect myself against the other 95% of that money, the cost of that money, right? Because if 95% goes up 5% in a year, that means it's going to cost you, about $4,500 more? Well, if you have 5% that even went up 20% that year, you're still behind the 8 ball, $3,500. So it comes down to more than just what's the right ticker symbol. It comes down to how much you're earning. Can you earn more? How much you're saving? How can you save a different amount? And how are you putting that saved money into a strategy that can protect you from the stupidness of the governments in this country? I was going to say in this country, but it's not just the U.S., in this world. And that's the question you want to be asking yourself, and those are the answers you want to be looking to get. to make sure that your purchasing power is protected, capital loss is protected, or you don't have capital loss. And that's what I do with my clients, to give them that whole picture, that whole strategy on bringing it in, on saving it, and protecting it. And if you're worried, and you've also figured out how to protect and grow, if you've also figured out how to create revenue, how to generate revenue, how to make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, but you feel you're no closer to knowing that you're safe from the stupidness of government policies, then I think I can probably help you. And in fact, I'm willing to give you some of my guidance for free. And if you want, you can just go ahead and reach out to Patty, my assistant, and see if you qualify for it. And if you do, we'll get on the phone and we'll see what I can do to help you. You guys have a great weekend. We're going to the beach tomorrow. We have not been to the beach in like 6 or 8 weeks. We all love going to the beach. Bowen and Everly love it. There's so many dogs there. So we're going to be hitting the beach this weekend, even in the winter. The temperature of the beach pretty much stays the same year-round here in Silicon Valley. So I hope you guys go see something that you love doing that maybe you haven't done in the last couple months. You take care, and I'll speak with you soon.